Hi, everybody. Welcome. Apologies, we're a couple of minutes late. We're just sorting how to get this working. Again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you are joining. Welcome to today's session of SecPod webcast. I'm Jigseed, your host. Through this webcast series, we bring to you the latest happenings at SecPod and exciting stuff that the team at SecPod is working on to help enterprise IT security teams prevent cyber attacks. I'd like to introduce today's panelists to all of you. I have with me Ravi and Marcus. Both of them are from sales engineering. They know the tech, they know how the technology, the solution works, and how customers benefit. I think no better than them to talk about today's topic, which is an interesting. We're going to talk about a daunting problem that enterprises face, right? So, I'll request Ravi and Marcus to just say hello.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you for joining. It's fantastic to be on this forum, and we have a very interesting session. Looking forward to an interactive session where you folks can ask a lot of questions, and we can probably clarify any doubts you may have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think Ravi kind of covered it. So thanks everybody for joining. We do have a really neat topic and something that having been a previous CISO, I'm familiar with having dealt with. So we'd love to bring that information out for you guys today.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So before we jump in, I'd like to remind everybody that a recorded version of this session will be available both on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. It will also be available on this Bright Talk channel. If you may want to take a look again or share with your colleagues, we will also send a recording to your email after the session, so you can watch it later. Right. Towards the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A session where we'd love to get your questions, answer them for you. You can post your questions below your video, in the chat box below your Bright Talk player, right? For those of you just joining, welcome again. Today we're going to talk about a couple of things. And we're going to start talking about a million vulnerability problem for enterprises. And that's kind of got a ring to it. Usually we get excited talking about $1 million problems. I am interested in is definitely knowing what is this million vulnerability problem, Marcus and Ravi. Right. Of course. And then and since we call it a problem, it's not a good thing. That's what I can make from the topic, but definitely there's a lot to explore here, right? Then we're going to talk about a risk-based vulnerability remediation solution that SecPod offers its enterprise clients today. And we're going to also focus a little bit on the SSVC framework that we have used in building this solution, that powers the science behind this solution. And then we do have a quick demo to show of this of the platform, of the solution. How does it work, and how IT security teams today use it, right? And then finally the Q&A session. So that's the plan. um a little bit about SecPod. We exist since 2008. Our primary work has gone into building vulnerability databases and solutions, OEM solutions for security vendors. The other half of our journey has gone into building the SanerNow platform, and really happy to say it out loud that we have enterprises from across 40 and more countries using the solution today, right? So that's a long journey we have come through. Uh, we do over a billion scans every day for our customers, and there's a lot that we do for our customers. You can definitely check it out uh, right on our website. So I'll go back to Marcus and Ravi. right, the problem, since we talked about the million vulnerability problem, right? In my conversations with peers from the industry, what I have seen or heard rather is there's a traditional practice, right, in cyber attack management, and usually vulnerability management maybe lies at the bottom of that, right? And what SecPod is trying to do is bring more focus onto prevention, flip the funnel, and before detect and response, start with a prevention strategy, implement a prevention strategy. In your view, what could be the top maybe two or three problems that you have experienced or rather heard from customers in your journeys, right? Where you see there's a lot enterprises must do when it comes to their cyber attack prevention strategy. Marcus, maybe Ravi, both of you can take turns and talk about that maybe.
Sure. Ravi, you want to go first?
Sure, no problem, Marcus. Thank you, Jaksir, for that fantastic introduction. And folks, thanks once again for joining this particular webinar. Jaksir, in my experience of managing complex enterprises, developing products, one of the things I have come across is the overall approach to the security itself is not prevention oriented. That is one of the larger observations I have had. The second aspect is that we because we have siloed teams within the IT infrastructure setup, we intend to have tools owned by each of these teams, and they're not talking to each other. And because of that, you don't have one single pane of visibility of all the risks that you could have identified and managed it more efficiently. And the biggest of the challenges is there are overlapping solutions and there are overlapping data points from each of these different solutions a specific team is looking into. But none of the teams are able to make a sense of that data and actually arrive at a very good solution. And other thing you will probably hear and see with a lot of C-level executives, they don't have the confidence that they've actually addressed all the vulnerabilities together, because I think that's largely due to the multiple overlapping solutions they may have, and there are so many different data points from different tools, and they don't have visibility into all these data points in one single pane of glass, right? So that will be my top 3 or 4 points, which I think is the biggest of the challenges. I'll hand it off to Marcus to share his thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. And I'll probably just build off of what you just said, because you kind of nailed it, right? The first is cybersecurity is completely reactive today. When you think about it, even from a vulnerability management perspective, you're reacting to a vulnerability that has already been found. You're not finding any day zeros. You're not, proactively closing doors. So everything is reactive. And as you take in all those vulnerabilities and you take in all of the different attack surfaces that you have to manage and deal with, the problem only expands as the organization gets larger. So if you take a smaller organization that might have, not just because of the size, but the complexity, right? You might have more versions of different types of operating systems or different types of applications or different types of integrations or different types of open APIs to other partners, vendors, et cetera, that you're trying to manage. So all of that becomes just completely reactive. But then as you go through vulnerability assessment and taking all of that into consideration, the question becomes, what do I actually fix today? What can I put off to tomorrow? What do I need to address so that I don't get pwned today? I don't end up in the news tomorrow. Those are the types of things that we think of. And honestly, as again, those organizations get bigger, you're dealing with more and more siloed parts of it. You're sending those, whether if you're on the cybersecurity side, you might be sending the scans and telling them what needs to be addressed. If you're on the IT side, you might be receiving those scans, trying to figure out what to go test and what needs to be fixed. And then, of course, you're going to have change control for all of those systems. So it becomes a matter of prioritization, it becomes a matter of scheduling, and it becomes a matter of most likely to get attacked on, right? And then, of course, you have to report that up. If you're at the CISO level, you're reporting that up to the CEO, the board of, the executive leadership team, and the board of directors. And like Ravi said earlier, right? How sure am I of this report that I'm providing today? I'm going to be semi-sure, but I'm going to be mostly sure if something was done, and it becomes a game of how much can I do to feel confident enough that I'm okay for today, and tomorrow is another day. So I think that's what I've seen and what I've had to address. And of course, all of that comes down to under a magnifying glass. The smaller you are and the larger you are, it becomes exponential to deal with. So you're not dealing with it. You have different management level team members dealing with it. So then it becomes an issue of now extrapolating what is it that I'm being told and what is it that's actually being fixed. And then, of course, at some point or another, someone will find a hole for you and tell you where your problem was. So, but yeah, that's I think, Ravi, I might have said the same thing you said, just in a different way.
Yeah,
But
hopefully, when they find the problem, it's not too late.
well, that's what I said. When somebody is going to find the problem, it's not usually somebody within your organization.
Yeah. Interesting conversation, right? I mean, this quote that I came across: "Only the lucky ones do not get attacked." Right. So
I think it's the unknown ones, right? It's not the lucky. You're lucky or unknown. I don't know. It's a double-edged sword.
You are lucky until you are unlucky. That's all.
Matter of time.
Yeah. Great. So yes. So interesting, right? So that that's what enterprises are facing today, right? All of these challenges, and that's where I think a really interesting take from SecPod is to help IT security teams flip their approach and then prioritize prevention, which would address a lot of challenges that we just talked about, right? That's where I'd like to also quickly walk through what is the SanerNow platform, SecPod SanerNow platform, right? It's we call it SanerNow Cyber Hygiene Platform, which is based on three fundamental aspects: prevention, automation, and continuity, right? Bringing the vulnerability management making it a continuous practice, right? That's what SanerNow does for enterprises. It has 7 modules serving visibility control, detection, prioritization, and remediation mitigation use cases. Though you can play around and build your own solution, and that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to talk about today, right? So today's session is all about talking is walking through the risk-based remediation solution that an enterprise IT security team can build using all the features and tools available here. And I'm going to hand it over back to Marcus to walk us through what is the solution, and then nitty-gritties of the solution, and then how does an enterprise deal with the many vulnerability problem that we also are going to touch upon. Over to you, Marcus.
Great, thanks. And let's see, how do I grab
All
control
you have
here?
to do. So there are these green previous next buttons. So you just have to click on them.
Oh, we're just walking through this part of it. We're not
Yes.
doing a demo.
Yeah.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So from the sorry about that, guys. I thought we were going straight into the live demo here. So again, going back to what Jags here was outlining, the different aspects of what has to happen and how that got brought into a single platform. And one of the things that kind of drew me to SecPod is the ability to do all of this in one tool. But the idea is the scan aspect of it, which typically is going to be a separate solution, and then detection, and then of course the prioritization, which is usually done manually, the patching aspect of it, and then of course to secure the endpoints and any compliance management that you might have to comply with, whether you're doing particular standards or you have things like PCI that you need to adhere to. This really making that holistic point of view tied together in a single pane of glass and a single solution that's allowing you to do all of it. I think that's a key thing because when I was having to do this, everything was separate. I had separate tools, I had separate reports, I had separate systems. I had to do it manually or use other tools to try to automate it. And so for all of this being in that Encompass circle, for me, that risk-based remediation is fantastic, right? So taking that next step, what becomes the keys for this, right? From a strategic point of view, looking at the vulnerability backlogs, everybody has this large vulnerability list. You have a backlog, it sits there. Realistically, how many people actually move anything up from the backlog unless it gets elevated by some exploit that has happened in the wild or some other vulnerability that's become more critical based off of the fact that it's opened up other doors. So being able to address those large vulnerability backlogs and figure out what really needs to be done. The reactive approach to security today, that's not very strategic approach. We talked about that at the beginning, right? Everything is reactive by nature. The lack of innovation, I don't want to call it slack, but we have as a bullet point here, the lack of innovation is really something that needs to be in the strategic point of view, right? You need to look at innovation and how it's going to enable you to do things going forward. You just can't sit stagnant in the cybersecurity world. Certainly bad actors aren't. The inability to qualify risks to the board, we were just talking about that. You have to know what your risks are, and you have to be able to take the approach of, this is what I need to be concerned of, this is what I need to elevate up, and this is where I'm going to need to potentially either get funding for or get permission to go figure out how to address. The cost controls, right? You start adding on all of these different things like tools and resources and external resources for pen testing and other activities. The cost control starts to get out of whack pretty quickly. Security uncertainty, we've talked about that as well, right? What is uncertain out there? Everything is uncertain out there unless you know where your security posture lies, what your risk assessment status is. You're not going to be able to really have any certainty around that. Meeting the scale of what's going on today with the digital disruptions, it goes way beyond DOS attacks, DDoS attacks, and any scans that are happening. From a strategic point of view, I can tell you that my home firewall gets scanned over 1,700 times per day. So imagine a business and how especially if you're a prominent business or an advertised business, you become a target automatically. So trying to meet the scale of the disruption of the more you are aware out there in the world, the more likely people are to come try to find a way to disrupt what you're doing. And then, of course, SecOps efficiencies and reducing redundancies. That's across the board. That's not just within the cybersecurity team. That is also across shadow IT, other parts of the organizations, right? Everybody creates their own shadow IT to deal with a lot of these things. And some of them are just to keep up with what's being provided from those vulnerability scans. And then we move into execution. And the high cost of the available tools out there today. So obviously cybersecurity is a big deal. It makes the news regularly. All the tools out there have a high cost. You're lacking qualified staff. We see that all over the place, right? In fact, the government just released a really cool report how they're going to reduce the requirements from a 4-year college degree so that they can hire on new cybersecurity talent because of the shortage that exists out there today. So there's a lot going on with qualified staff globally. Siloed tools, we've all seen that. We all experienced that. So how are you supposed to have good execution when your tools are all based in different parts of the organization? The speedy remediation, I don't think anybody is going to argue that there's a speedy remediation going on out there today, especially with change controls and production systems and the typical lack of being able to identify, address, and automate it all at the same time. The high rate of false positives. We all experience this on a regular basis, especially if we're running regular scans. And I want to point out that high false positives go both ways. It's not just a false positive. It could also be a false negative. And those are the ones that can creep up on you and really get you. So really having the continuous scanning on that execution aspect of it is key. It's not just the false positives. It's the inverse as well. And that's the one that's going to bite us. The speed of exploit, obviously, that from an execution standpoint, if you can't address it, somebody else will exploit it for you. Inability to audit the status at any moment. A lot of times, everything that we've been using traditionally is going to be a snapshot in time, right? That scan is a snapshot in time for that hour, for that day, for that system. or potentially for that application or for that website. So whatever you're getting, it's already outdated by the time you start doing something against it. And as it becomes outdated, vulnerabilities become more exploited, other issues start to creep up, and they start to compound. So you need to address those relatively quickly, but being able to constantly be aware of it without having any major impact on any of your network bandwidth or availability. That's another item on the execution standpoint. And of course, the comprehension of reports, right? Every tool has its own report. Every tool creates its own little way of looking at it, the way that it separates it out into sections, and the data that it gives you. Some are better than others, but really understanding a simple report that you could pass up to not just the executive leadership team, the board, but to anybody that could quickly see what's going on in the environment, especially if you have auditors. That makes your life a lot easier from an execution standpoint. On the technical side, getting clarity on asset inventory. This is something that's been an issue for years, right? You have your CMDB, you have what populates your CMDB, again, a snapshot in time typically, unless you have a constant automation of grabbing that data and bringing that in, whether it's physical or virtual information, you're not going to understand what your assets are. And from a cybersecurity perspective, even less so. How many of those tools are actually grabbing that information on a constant basis to keep your assets current in terms of what's in the infrastructure? How many times have we plugged in something and unplugged it? It's gotten an IP address, or we do a POC and forget a system is sitting out there. And I'm sure none of us have Raspberry Pis just lying around, right? These all have IP addresses. These are all assets that are sitting there. We may have forgotten about them. They now become something that could be exploited, or an attack surface increase on that. Lacking the automation of an integrated platform, again, goes back to those siloed tools, right? It's not just siloed tools, it's siloed tools within the siloed environment. So not having that all tied together really makes the job not only more cumbersome, but it requires more people to do the job. So from a technical standpoint, automating and integrating all of those components together, I think, is huge. Legacy risk prioritization. So as we talked about this, right? How are you doing risk prioritization today? Everybody is doing it manually, right? You might have tools give you ideas of what your risk prioritization is, but then you have to overlay that with another tool, another scan. You're going to overlay it with your inventory. You're going to overlay it with what you have going on from a prioritization standpoint of the different assets that you have. So really, the risk prioritization methods are almost always manual. So how do you elevate that and make it something that can be done relatively quickly, give you your starting point of where you need to be from a risk prioritization standpoint, and how are you going to technically achieve that? The continuous scans, right? Speeding continuous scans. We've heard from various different people. Ravi, maybe you could chime in on this too, right? How many times have we heard things like not so quick scans, right? I don't want to throw out any names, but we hear this a lot from different customers, right? And from a scanning perspective, right, it's not just it takes a long time to do it, but then how are you going to do that continuously if it takes such a long time? And of course, there's the resource consumption associated to it. Lack of controls beyond patching, right? How are you going to go just beyond patching? And what does that even mean? Beyond patching is, what are you going to do to continuously patch, to proactively patch, to stay on top of what's going on out there in your environment, right? You have engineers that, and honestly, Ravi, I think I'll throw sales engineers in there as well. We like to have control of our systems, right? You're going to have folks that like to have local admin access, or that are going to have the ability to do things like turn particular services off for the ability to do an install on something that they're working on, but then maybe forget to turn them back on, say maybe a firewall, or SE Linux on Linux systems, things of that nature. We want to be aware of and have that continuous, not just patching, but updation of what needs to be in place. And then, of course, it's cumbersome to deploy a lot of legacy tools, right? You're doing it manually. You're putting it within your environment. You're having to provide out, a shared access, and you maybe are going to have it different based off of each of the parts of the organization. You're going to have IT or somebody else deploy them. They're going to have to go into a gold build, etc. So really, those old legacy deployment methods and legacy tools become more and more burdensome as time goes on. So how do you take that technology and really bring it into the next generation? Let me pause there. Ravi, Jagsir, anything that I missed that we should cover on this?
I think overall we more or less covered what we think are the challenges as of today when we speak, right? So these are all the current challenges. We're not talking something about that is happening 10 years back, but it has been happening since last 10 20 years. So uh, like you said, the other critical aspect we should probably look at is also this, right? I think maybe sometimes we miss out one critical aspect is the more number of tools you have, the security associated with that tools uh, also is a challenge, right? Even the tools what you are deploying to make you more secure could be vulnerable. So the more software, more applications, more devices, more tools you have in an environment could be contributing to more number of risks. So keeping that in mind, I think it's very important for all large enterprises to simplify their entire enterprise architecture, right, and make them more secure. So probably as from our perspective, that is the journey we are trying to take our customers on, right? So where we could help them consolidate all their existing legacy solutions, and provide them with one single platform which can address all the inadequacies which are there since last decade or so, right, in the cybersecurity framework, right? I think that's all what I would like to say. I think, Marcus, you've covered very, very extensively what are the current challenges. So I would not like to take more time on that particular topic.
Oh, great points. Great points, Ravi. Thanks. And yeah, thanks for bringing that up, right? It's current. It's been going on for a long time. And yeah, the lack of security tools, for lack of a better term, really has made the news quite a bit recently.
Yeah.
So, Chad, I'll go quickly through this slide, right? So, from a risk-based remediation solution, we're really talking about just flipping the pyramid, what they're doing today versus how they should be doing it in our recommendation going forward. And it's really just taking this pyramid and basically flipping it upside down. For prevention becomes at the top, and the detection becomes the next thing, and then the response. Because today, as we pointed out a couple of times, right, it's very reactive in nature, has to be, and it's the way that the tools and the way that everything has been designed is for us to be reactive. So how do we look at it from a more proactive perspective? And that's really just flipping it on its head with, a few items here just slightly changed out. But the reality is start with the prevention rather than ending with the prevention. Instead of it being a post-incident task to go out and identify, what are the things you want to go now put in place? How about addressing them beforehand? Obviously, for a lot of people listening, this might sound like a pipe dream, but there's a way to do this. So don't just feel like we're just talking to talk. This is something that has been achieved, and we're going to talk about how it got there. So
The other
moving on.
thing
Go
what
ahead, Ravi.
I kind of want to touch upon is also
Yeah.
additionally, I don't know if any of the large enterprises do this study. More than 98% of the attacks happen on those systems which either don't have a very good vulnerability solutions or don't have very good risk remediation solutions in their environment, right? Basically, 98% of your risks are arising out of non-patched systems in your environment, right? So that is what we are trying to help you with, right? When you take prevention as the primary use case and drive your cybersecurity strategy on top of that, what you're doing is you're actually eliminating those 98% risks to start with. So whatever is remaining is only 2%, and you can figure out better ways to address that 2% risks within your environment far more easily than if you were to go with the traditional approach of starting with detection, response, recovery, and prevention.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, a great stat, Ravi. I think one of the things that I experienced in the incidents that I had to run was exactly what you said. It was the stuff that we could have taken care of. It was the basics. It was the 98%. Had we done that a little bit more effectively, I think I would have had a few more weekends and holidays that my wife would not have been upset that I missed. But I think that's huge, right? To point that out, 98% is a large number. And if you can free up whatever time your resources are having to deal with that today, right? That 2% that you have to deal with really is going to be a lot more resource and time allocation that you can bring that down even further and be proactive against any kind of cybersecurity attack.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, right? You could optimize your human resource much more effectively than trying to do the same thing day in and day out. And
Yeah.
probably yes, we would have spent a lot more time with the family during the weekends.
Weekends and holidays, security incidents always happen on a Friday or a holiday. So platform extract from a risk-based remediation solution standpoint. So again, working your way up. And we a little bit repetitive here. We just talked about it, but from an infrastructure vulnerability, what are you doing? From what are you going to remediate? From how you're going to remediate it? And then how you're going to harden those systems. So really, it's the scan and detection aspect and the validation. We talked about the false positives and false negatives, the prioritization, and how are you going to prioritize what it is that you're finding in these scans and these detections that you're performing. And then, of course, how are you going to remediate it? That's going to be the application of those patches if necessary, and testing. And what's not needed, what's not covered that may or may not be needed is the rollback functionality. Everybody tends to forget about this on the cybersecurity side, but if you're implementing those change controls in the production environment, rollback is critical. You might have to roll back. You can't have that production system, especially if it is a revenue generating system, be down. So you're going to have a plan for a rollback. You're going to have to be able to execute a rollback. And it's just a lot easier if it's something that's included or has an ability to be included from that patch management perspective. And then, of course, hardening the systems, right? And that goes back to things like the compliance management with CIS controls or PCI or others that you may need to have that are going to allow you to harden it from that perspective. And of course, enforcing it. It's not just hardening it, it's in the enforcement of it. So the continuous assessment and updation of those types of controls. And that's where I think you can get to the near zero. Otherwise, if you're not continuously assessing and updating it, anybody can go in there and make the change after you've done your thing. And then, of course, you not only do you lose the whole point of having it in compliance, but you lose that particular secure component of it. Ravi, Jax, here, anything to add?
So
I think this is well laid out. Ravi, you were saying something. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the important points to kind of remember for enterprise technical and business decision makers who are making these investments in IT security solutions is there is a data point, you guys, people can do this research, is that in a large enterprise, which is say more than 5,000 employee sized or device sized organization, you will see about 30,000 vulnerabilities, open vulnerabilities every month on an average, right? Now, for you to get to near zero vulnerability is not an easy task. Okay, and that too if you have all the challenges we spoke about in the earlier slide. All right, which basically means that you are actually open to exploitation, right? You're just welcoming all these people. Hey, I have so many vulnerabilities, please come and exploit my environment, right? So other aspect to remember is if you invest in the right solutions and right tools, you are actually recovering your investment in less than 2 years, or probably you're actually making more profit on your investment. So one of the studies says that if you make the right choices in your vulnerability lifecycle management solutions, your returns are more than 200% by the end of second year. So it's a fantastic data point for somebody who's trying to procure a solution to arrive at a stage where he can say, I am at near zero vulnerability, right? And again, we are providing a simplistic way to achieve that. You don't have to go through learning multiple solutions, training your workforce on multiple technologies, and deploying these solutions with complex discovery solutions. So we are providing the simplest and direct path to reach your goal of near zero vulnerabilities and for better return on your investments, right?
Yeah, fantastic stats, Ravi. I love it. Those stats are the ones that really kind of help drive home the points. But also, I want to point out again, is for those that are listening, this is not a pipe dream. This is out there. It's been out there for several years. You may not have heard of it, I certainly had not heard of it, but I just want to keep pointing that out as we get there, because we will explain how all of this was achieved and how SecPod was able to tie all of these components together for that one pane of glass solution that gives you all of this. So from a risk-based remediation solution, right, it's coming down to, what does that solution workflow look like? It's the identification of the vulnerabilities, it's the prioritization of those vulnerabilities, and then the remediation of those vulnerabilities. So that's essentially tying together 3, if not more, of the tools that are currently being used by most organizations today, right? It's the assessment, the asset discovery, the scanning, detection, the validation on the vulnerability side. So the vulnerability management aspect of it. Then how are you going to prioritize them? There's the risk assessment that has to happen. There is the contextual assessment. There's the exploitation. And then, of course, there's the severity of that asset being affected. So is it something that, again, is on a revenue generating system or a critical internal system? When I worked at Hewlett Packard a million years ago, one of the things that I was responsible for was the email system. And this was a long time ago. So let me tell you, when you're a very, very lowly hardware engineer at Hewlett Packard and you get a phone call from the vice president because the email system isn't working, you learn very quickly how critical the email system is to the organization, right? So it's understanding how severe that asset is to the company and what the severity of it is and how you want to protect it and what needs to be done on it. Then, of course, the remediation aspect of it. It's not just remediating, putting a patch on it. We all know that taking patches occasionally from vendors, I'll use the typical Microsoft example, right? Those patches don't always work as intended or require an additional patch or have some other things. Of course, you want to test these patches before you just go out and deploy them, right? So you're going to have an ability to test them on a few systems to ensure that they work before you go through and apply them. And then that rollback. It's not just the rollback of you having to manually go in there and write a PowerShell script or remove some stuff from the registry or uninstall, if you have that ability for that particular patch to actually do an uninstall. It's the ability to roll it back all the way and not have to do that on each of the systems you went and deployed it on. And then, of course, the endpoint management aspect of it, right? This is just all of it being put in together and being able to manage that endpoint, not just from the operating system standpoint, but from an application standpoint. So if you have patches for applications, that's maybe just as critical as the operating system patches. You want to make sure that you don't leave those off to potentially another tool, potentially another time, potentially another prioritization. Now, a lot of times these end up being separated, the operating system and the applications, and a lot of it gets lost in the shuffle. So you want to make sure it's kind of treated as a cohesive unit when you're doing that testing and patching and deployment. And then the system hardening, we talked about this over and over again. No system should just come out of the factory and say, yep, oh, it's good. They're not. You have controls for a reason, and those controls are there to help you harden your systems and protect yourself from any external threats. So being able to not only harden them, but also manage that and ensure that compliance. Again, we go back to the typicals, but we provide a superset. SecPod has the superset of these compliance standards, and of course, you can reduce them down to meet your needs as to the subsets that most people are familiar with, like PCI and CIS and others. Ravi, Jax, here, anything to add?
Yeah. So other critical aspect, I think, what we are going to encounter as we move forward to the new age of technology, right? So you have more complex environments. See, maybe 20 years back, majority of the infrastructure would be on-prem, right? So today you have a hybrid solution, and within that hybrid solution, you have complexity of having a IaaS, PaaS, multiple public clouds, private cloud, SaaS-based applications. All of this makes it so difficult for you to really define a very good vulnerability lifecycle management strategy, right? So you need one single solution that can actually address all these intricacies and complexities of your enterprise to manage your vulnerability lifecycle management very smoothly, efficiently, and providing you the complete visibility end to end, right? So that's again something we are future proofing you as you adopt our solution. One of the things you will realize is your investments are not for today, but your investments are for the future as well, right?
I'm not going to admit to anything, but I will point out that hacking 20 years ago and getting into systems was a lot simpler.
Maybe people will point out and say, "Hey, I will work on mainframes."
It's interesting, right? Mainframes, and you get into the AS400s and some of those other old banking systems.
Yeah.
The security is non-existent for the most part, but there's that security wall and moat that goes around it to really help protect it. But just from the standpoint of what you're talking about, right? A lot of this has been around for a long time and just progressively gotten to where it is today. But you're right, the problems themselves have never truly been addressed in the way that we're talking about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great talking points so far, Marcus.
Yeah, well, we've all lived it, right? So I think anybody listening or on the podcast here or in the webinar, excuse me, is really going to understand and
Yeah.
probably feel some of that pain as we have. So from a platform perspective, right? Let's talk about the risk-based remediation. The entire platform is driven by a single agent. What we mean by this is there's one agent that's going to go out on your Windows, your Mac, your Linux systems, obviously systems that can handle an agent. And then it's going to scan the entire infrastructure within 5 minutes. Now that sounds crazy, but the reality is the ability to scan those ranges, the ability to separate it out, like Ravi talked about, right? You can have multiple scanners. You can have the ability to put them in different parts of your infrastructure, whether that's in the cloud, whether that's a different subnet, whether that's a different network segment altogether. All of these things are just able to be scanned, and anything with an IP address is going to be identified and put in there. Unifying the vulnerability management, risk prioritization, patch management, endpoint management, and the compliance component. In my previous role, when I did have responsibility for security, the compliance management was completely separate. The endpoint management was completely separate. The patch management was completely separate. The risk prioritization was completely manual, and the vulnerability management was completely separate. So for me, again, this is something that rings true. This is what I love about SecPod and bringing us all under one umbrella, is just making that something so simplified and easy. Had I had that, I probably would have spent a lot less time and focused on some of the other things I had to do. Powered by the world's largest security intelligence library. So I want to drill down on this, only because I don't think we as a company, as a corporation, SecPod, does a good job of really outlining what this is. Now, obviously, we have a lot of NDAs in place, and we can't talk a lot about what this means, but SecPod provides this library of these security vulnerabilities and intelligence and checks to a lot, if not most, if not a high percentage of the other vulnerability management tools on the market today. So having that large library, having that 14 years of experience in just making sure that the library is the best in the world, I think is also key to kind of outlining it. There is no subset. SecPod is the superset of all of the intelligence that's out there from a vulnerability management perspective. Ravi, Jax here, you guys have obviously been at SecPod a lot longer than I've been here. So is there anything you want to add to that, or that you can add to that without violating any NDAs?
Yeah. So one of the things I also realized again, right, is the amount of coverage we provide across different products and operating system platforms. We just don't cover just CVEs, right? I think somebody looks at our SCAP repository, they'll realize to the depth we go in capturing the information, and kudos to our content team that they maintain this database day in and day out. And we have very strong SLAs with some of these vendors. So we keep our SCAP repository or the vulnerability database up to date within 24 hours in most of the cases. And we don't have, our 0-day coverage, um, experience. What I learned from the team is exceptional. I can't think of any other solution in the market who could claim that our 0-day vulnerability coverage has been up to date almost 100% of the time. It's extremely difficult to achieve, right? Even with all the technology what you have in the hand, if you don't necessarily have a very good team on the ground to do this work passionately, I don't think we would have reached where we are at this point of time.
Yeah, definitely. And then from a customer point of view, it's really, I think, Marcus, you talked about how it's important, the certainty piece that you talked about, right? And I think this goes and gels well in that whole the answer that enterprise IT security teams can find using this solution is going to be much more certain, right? Given the expertise that they get access to when they are building their risk remediation solution using SecPod's capability.
Yeah. And I think you both touched on a couple of things, right? The one that stands out to me is the passionate aspect of the team that's involved in gathering this and doing this on a daily basis, right? That passion that drives them is, I think, why SecPod is able to not only have the largest library, but how fast they are on top of everything. And like you pointed out, Ravi, it's not just CVEs. It's not just a CVE scan. That's the whole thing, right? It's any vulnerability that's going to be out there. And the fact that the team is so dedicated to doing that, I think is amazing, because that's how you're able to get to something like this. There's no other way. Right? If they're not dedicated to doing that job, in my day, many years ago, we lived off of caffeine and Twinkies. So I think it got moved up to Hot Pockets and Red Bull, and then progressed into something else. I don't even know where it's at today. Probably some crazy energy drink, and who knows what they're eating, but. That's what drove us, right? Was you have the caffeine, the sugar, and that desire to just find a way in, and look for that vulnerability. So fantastic. I just want to call that out for the team. So just covering the last 2 points here, the only CISA stakeholder specific vulnerability categorization, framework-based solution. So the SSVC we talked about, I don't like to throw out acronyms without qualifying it. I'm sure everybody who's a cybersecurity individual knows what this is, but we're talking about specific vulnerability categorization, stakeholder specific vulnerability categorization. And what that means is taking information from you as a company, you as a client, you as an individual, and filling out essentially a questionnaire. And that questionnaire enables us and enables the platform to identify what it is that's going to be more critical for you, how your infrastructure is configured, all of the details that allow the vulnerability categorization to be specific to you. It's not just some random algorithm that's going to define it based off of the global that may or may not apply to you. It's going to be specific based off of how you answer the questionnaire. The system takes that into account and identifies that risk prioritization specific to your environment. I don't know any other place, any other tool, anything that has done anything close to that, at least not in my recent experience or my past.
That's fantastic, right? So what our tool can do is basically tell you that, hey, these are your critical assets, these are your critical devices. Why don't you just patch them first? Right? Just secure your critical devices first, then look at everything else little later. How simple the world would have been 10 years back if we had this solution of this nature, Marcus. I have spent thousands of hours working through SCCM, doing the patching for everything. Now, with the risk prioritization, I think if they had said, hey, just do 1% of your device patching first, look at everything else a little later, I definitely would have had more holidays and more weekends with my kids.
Back to the holidays and weekends, right?
Yeah.
Always. And I think the last point here is a report of choice. I kind of like the way that's worded, but I don't really know what that means until you actually go in and do it. And this means, what reports do you need? How do you want to put them together? And who do you want to send them to? And do you want them to send out regularly? Which I think is fantastic. Because I used to have to PDF it, used to have to put it in an email, and I used to have to send it out to a distribution list. And then I had to set up a meeting so that I could review the results of what I sent them and let them know what was critical, what was impending, where we were at. So for me, I think the report of choice is fantastic, right? It's not just pre-done reports. It's also the report of pulling in any components that you want into there. And we talked about this earlier. Every tool has their own reporting kind of layout, framework, and the way that it explains things. I love the simplicity with the detail behind it, right? It's not just a simple report. It's a simple to read report with the supporting detail that tells you what system, what's going on, what the issue is, etc., as you drill into it. So for me, that is the fantastic amount of simplicity to read with the proper detail to support it that I could pass on to any executive or anybody in the organization to say, here's what it is, go figure it out. The other thing I ran across a lot is when I sent those reports out, and again, please, nobody take offense to this. It was just the way it was at that particular organization, right? It was the engineering department that would always ask me the most questions. Well, what do you mean? What do you want me to do here? Well, I want you to patch that system. Well, I can't patch that system. Well, why can't you patch that system? Because it'll break this other thing. Well, why is that other thing? It becomes this cyclical conversation of, why am I talking to you about it? You just patch it. You shouldn't even be on that operating system. It's outdated. It's deprecated. Right? Anyway, the conversations become circular. And so really giving them something that is very, very clear. Look, I understand if you have to be on that system, you have to at least patch these 4 components that will at least give you that secure mechanism because, the SSL was having an issue or something of that nature, right? And that's another recent one that's just come back up. So I think from a reporting standpoint, the clarity and simplicity with the supporting detail, again, it's not a simple report. It's just simple to read. And that's my takeaway from it. Ravi, Jagsir, anything to add there?
No, I think you're bang on, and I think what the team has developed. I think we can even, maybe in your demo we can probably show a couple of reports as well, just to show how simplified it is, and the important aspect of any report is to actually break it down and make it understandable for everybody, right? So we have strong data analytics tool just to do that today, but hopefully the reports that you would show in your demonstration will kind of prove that point, that whatever reports we have actually created as part of our out of the box report solutions are very meaningful and are to the point, right? So that you can actually use that data and perform certain actions as needed in your environment.
Excellent. All right, let's step in here then. Here's that risk-based remediation extract. So the SSVC framework, the main highlight is, again, that it's taking into account all of these things, but the quick eye, right? Your eye is always drawn to red, bold, bright. You can see there's 725. That's the number that pops out the biggest on the actionable aspects of it. The neat thing is it's color-coded, makes it really simple to understand. So from what do I need to do today before I go home? Obviously 725 is kind of high. This is going to be a larger enterprise organization. On some of the smaller organizations, smaller environments, you might see 1, maybe 10. But as your organization changes, you probably have the means and people to support something like this. So 725 that I want to take care of, to act on right away. 3,968. So this will be part of a patch cycle, typically something that's going to occur that's already regularly scheduled, things that are already set to roll out. And then you want to track 160,258, which sounds like a lot. But these might be things that you just need to keep an eye on that haven't progressed. Maybe they're not close to being exploitable without somebody being within the environment or some other necessary item. So that's where it starts to really prioritize it in terms of all of the things that you need to address, because patch everything is equal to patch nothing. No one is going to patch everything, because then they're going to roll back and spend twice as much time having to go problem solve. Okay, well, what did it break? Oh, well, it broke this because this was dependent on this other thing. So that system's down. Now we have to go fix that system. Or it broke this other thing, but now it's not working. So nobody's going to patch everything. And we do that, right? So it's going to be what needs to be patched and why, how you're going to address their vulnerability, and how quickly can I address it. And that's really what this is bringing to the spotlight. The other great thing that's on here is not just the vulnerabilities. You can see the misconfigurations on the bottom left. And there's quite a few that are in non-compliance. And this goes back to little things, right? Like us SEs like to do, Ravi, or some of the engineers like to do, right? We're going to go turn something off real quick and then we forget to turn it back on, or we're going to add, we're testing a particular piece of software that we need to do something for, etc. So those misconfigurations can crop up, and you see that that's a huge percentage, and they typically are as you start off and then slowly work your way and bring those down. Now, the bottom right, the exploitability. This is really neat because this is bringing to light the exploitability of that particular vulnerability that's actively being exploited today. So if you can get an idea of, this is great, but how likely is it for somebody to break in, do this, or exploit this vulnerability? The intent of this is to bring that to the forefront as part of your risk prioritization. Hey, how exploitable is this? How automatable is this? How likely is it that this is being exploited today, right? If it's not being exploited or it's hard to be exploited, it becomes a lower risk, even though the CVE might be high, right? It might be a very, very high risk, but if it's not really very exploitable or automatable, then all of a sudden the risk prioritization will drop it down. So these are all things that I think are phenomenal factors that bring up the risk prioritization module that we're going to talk about here in a bit. Ravi, Jaxir, anything to add there?
No, I think you're on the point. I don't have much to add, but if you look at this entire screen with all the four graphics, what you have in one single snapshot consolidated, I think this is all what you need to secure your environment, right? So in one single snapshot, you're able to understand what are your challenges and how it is prioritized, which are the areas that you need to focus on, and then just go and do the remediation.
Yeah. And the numbers on the left could be really, somebody could get startled, right? When you look at 340,000 vulnerabilities, right? But and then you see, oh, most of them are critical, right? Everything is critical. I mean, what am I supposed to do? And then, but then you delve deeper, and that's the beauty of the SSVC framework, right? It categorizes what needs action now. It may be critical, but may not need an action now. So that lays out a good actionable plan. And again, for you, I mean, both of you, right? You talked about a lot of holidays. I think this is the reason behind going back to those holidays and getting more time out of this, right? So no need to spend a lot of time on everything that you detect. Have a good action plan. That's where SSVC creates a good impact.
Yeah, basically, people on the call or people on the webinar, if you need more holidays, peaceful weekends, please please look at SanerNow platform.
That's a great point. All right, so real quick through this, we covered most.
I
There we
think
go.
I've hit the extension. Yeah.
We'll have to get going here quickly.
Yeah.
So I think the risk-based remediation framework is pretty clear why it's important. We talked about it, right? The data analysis. It's measured on it's done on data analysis. It measures the likelihood of the exploitation. We just talked about that. Huge aspects of taking into account the risk prioritization. It doesn't just do the vulnerability. It's based on the real world risk. It's based off of a complete picture of your organizational risk because you filled out that questionnaire, because it's specific to you. It brings the vulnerability management system transparency to the forefront, right? You're really seeing what's going on. The robustness of it is really tied to the privileges required to exploit the vulnerability. So that's into consideration along as the precise assessment of that risk vulnerability. So it's not just global like we talked about before. It's going to be tied to you, and it's going to be specific, and it's going to be based off of the criticality of your system in your environment and the likelihood that it is to be exploited. So that's pretty robust in and of itself. But it's also going to consider the vulnerability impact on the business and the relevance to those key stakeholders. That's another part of the questionnaire that takes into consideration, right? So again, if you have those, I've been drilled into me over 40 years now of hearing it. Haven't been in the business for 40 years, but certainly closer to 30. But for all of this time, I've just heard revenue generating systems, right? That's what drives a business, systems that are able to generate revenue. And so knowing what those systems are and their relevance to the organization, and the fact that they're not just going to get patched willy-nilly, and they're not just going to get scanned willy-nilly. You need to make sure that you have a plan for that, and you need to make sure that those have that higher consideration. And as you put that data into the system, it takes that into account. And obviously helping you make those decisions, right? Where should your vulnerability management efforts go? We saw that on the previous screen. And then how are you going to ensure that you don't have, that false sense of, hey, looks good, I'm going home today. Yeah. And then you get that call at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So really, it brings all of that under one umbrella. I can't talk favorably enough about the risk prioritization component. It is something that has wowed me, and it is something that I typically hear oohs and ahs when we go in to show this to other organizations. Ravi, Jack's here.
It's a powerful tool, very very powerful tool. It's just that we need to expose the capability of risk prioritization to all our enterprise customers, and that they'll see the value in it, right? So let's probably, Jaxir, if you're okay, jump into the demo and quickly.
Yeah, I think that'll be good, right?
Yeah.
We are already overshot
Yeah.
the time we had. Maybe a quick look at the product, and then a quick Q&A session would be
Yeah.
ideal.
Perfect.
Anyways, we're going to send this slide deck to everybody who's watching, and everybody who's registered for the webinar. So you'll have these slides in your inbox.
Marcus, in our next webinar, we'll talk about your guitars.
Oh, the guitars. Yeah, that's also from another lifetime. Somewhere out there in the crazy internet world is one of my albums, but
Oh, interesting.
long time ago.
We
should play it in our next session.
I don't even know that I have it anymore. It didn't go platinum or gold or silver. I think it went plastic, which is the CD printed on. All right. So are we ready for the demo?
Yes.
Yeah.
So all you got to do is share screen. There's a share screen button on your window. So you just got to hit that, and it will ask you to bring up
Oh,
your
I'm bringing
window.
it up on my side. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Hang on just a minute there. I thought we had a different one to bring up. So stand by. Let me just do this. All right. Share screen. Uh-oh. Let's see here. Excuse me, guys. I'm on a Mac here. I'm on Mac. It's requiring a lot of information.
I can see your screen now.
All right. Excellent. Let me bring up the proper window here. There we go. So let me just get to that risk prioritization. Now, this is a subset. This is actually just my lab environment.
Sorry to interrupt, because I can see your Bright Talk window, not your product window.
Oh, okay. Thank you for telling me that. Let me go back here and see what's going on with the share.
You'll probably have to bring up SanerNow platform on the Chrome window.
Okay. Is this the window you guys are seeing?
Not yet.
Cursor.
Are you still seeing the Bright Talk window?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Stand by for just a second then. I think Yeah, I see what's going on. Stand by. And actually, Ravi, I don't know, you might need to bring it up on your side.
Sure.
I may not be able to get this done in time here.
No problem.
Let me see. Plus, things went quiet out there. I've got 2 young boys. I'm not sure what they're doing. Nobody's
might want
crying.
to check on.
Nobody's crying yet. Yeah, Robbie, if you wouldn't mind, apologies. I'm not able to get the permissions here set up quickly enough. If you wouldn't mind taking over the demo,
No
and I will
problem.
stop it for just a minute.
Sure. That's all right. Okay, let me see if I can do a better job. Okay. Is it possible?
Can't see it yet.
Okay. Sorry, Jaksir, maybe you'll have to try it out at your end.
No problem. No
Yeah,
problem.
it's asking us to provide some access. Let me see.
Okay, great. That's the technology.
Yeah, it's asking me to do a quit and reopen. If I quit, I think I will be pushed out of the Bright
No
Talk.
problem. I'll bring it up here.
Yeah,
Great. Can you see my screen now?
absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Great.
Quick. Marcus, you wanna take over? You want me to drive it? Either way is okay.
Hey guys, apologies, I'm back. Yeah. If you don't mind driving it, Ravi, and I'll just color comment if that's okay.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay, folks who are new to our platform, all right. So we kept talking about having one single unified enterprise vulnerability lifecycle management solution, right? So that's our USP, and that's the vision for managing vulnerability lifecycle. So this is unified dashboard, which basically outlines all the data points which our system has discovered, identified the risks. All of that information is available in one single interface, right? The first section of the screen provides you all the devices, software applications, network subnets, device groups, all of that intricate information associated with infrastructure is discovered using our very strong discovery engine. And once we have this foundational data, we use our intelligent vulnerability scanner and we identify the risks across software and operating system vulnerabilities. We do support our customers deploy benchmarks using the CIS standards. You can deploy benchmarks like HIPAA, PCI, NIST, and basis the benchmark application, we do identify the misconfigurations and we do help our customers patch the misconfigurations. One of the unique proposition of our solution is continuous posture anomaly management, which basically does a deep dive analytics of the discovered data and identify the outliers. So basically, we are finding the potential vulnerabilities. This solution is more like a Sherlock Holmes, figures out what kind of vulnerabilities could be there in your environment and brings that up to the surface so that you can take necessary actions. Then obviously we have a very strong patch management solution. We support more than 32 plus operating systems, 400 plus third-party applications from a remediation perspective out of the box. So we do identify the missing patches. Further, once we have all of this information, what do you do with it? So which are the risks that you need to first act upon? How do you take that decision, right? So that's when our very powerful risk prioritization module comes into the play, and using industry first stakeholder specific vulnerability categorization module, we do the reprioritization of the risks across act, attend, track, star, and track, right? So for people who are not familiar with act, attend, track, star, and track, the maybe a good correlation could be in ITSM parlance would be a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and priority 4, right? How do we even arrive at this? So there are 4 critical parameters that we consider. We identify if there are any risks on the mission critical devices. Is the exploit itself highly rated? Can it be automated? And could it cause a total technical impact, right? These are the 4 mission critical parameters that we identify. And against that, what are the risks? And then we do the mapping against act, attend, track, star, and track as the reprioritization, right? Now, the other aspect you should probably look at is the act will most of the time will be less than 2% of your overall risks, right? So that is the overall impact of the risk prioritization as a module, right? If you do a consolidated count of all these risks that we have identified, it's almost close to 35,000 risks, but it is asking you to first address only 665 risks here, right? That's the fantastic capability of the risk prioritization module, right? And of course we do provide the recommendations to the teams who are logging into the system on the day. We give our own recommendations on which are the specific devices or the risks that they need to actually fix first, and then look at other aspects of their work a little later in the day, right? We do again provide remediation actions and recommendations against remediations. Both of that information is available so that the team can act upon it the moment they log into the shift, right? Even with all of this information, the biggest challenge for any CISO team, right? What do I do with this? Is there a meaningful way of understanding if I am actually doing well or not, right? That is where our cyber hygiene score comes into play. So we have just taken all of this information and we have plotted it across a scale of 0 to 100. And we are giving you one single score, which tells you how are you doing and what are the areas that you need to improve. All of that information we are giving you in one single summarized screen, right? So this is your baseline, this is your benchmark, this is the report that you need to look at and understand how are you doing, right? Further, we give you a trend of this on a regular frequency. How are you doing in last 30 days? What was your trend? Which are the devices, which are the accounts that are contributing to higher or lower scores? So you could then prioritize your actions against those specific set of devices, accounts, and improve your cyber hygiene score and make your environment more cyber resilient, right? See, that's the overall goal of a solution, to make your IT infrastructure and environment more cyber resilient. So that's core to our application and the capabilities that we bring to the table, right? Now we'll quickly jump in to the risk prioritization module itself, and we'll quickly give you a walkthrough, and then we will probably take a few questions from you folks. Again, Marcus, if you have something to add, please feel free to jump in and share your thoughts as well. Fantastic. Okay, so such a busy screen with so much of information, right? But what is highlighted? So we have identified the risks, we have reprioritized them across act, attend, track, star, and track. So what is act? Act is your P1, attend is your P2, track star is P3, track is P4. All right. So again, how did we make this particular decision, right? So across each of these vulnerabilities, there is a decision tree under no more. And that is how we arrive at how this particular risk has been reprioritized as act, attend, track, star, or track, right? And we do, yeah, you can probably click on that decision tree for a second, Jagsir. Sorry about that. Fantastic, right? Now, look at how we're not only telling you that, hey, we have reprioritized these risks into act, attend, track, star, or track, but we are also telling you how did we arrive at that, right? So our starting point is the exploitation. So we have identified this exploit as part of our vulnerability and compliance management solutions, right? And we then identify and understand what is the impact of this particular risk. Is it automatable? Could it cause a technical impact? Can the technical impact be partial or total? And is it actually causing damage to your essential services? Right? Basis that we arrive at this reprioritization metrics, right? Further, we do then help you recategorize your own set of devices into business centric, data centric, internet facing devices, right? So the overall impact of the risk prioritization again is to give you that clarity of why you are reprioritizing some of your risks into act, attend, track, star, and track, so that you can take informed decisions on building a remediation plan basis the recommendations that the risk prioritization module is providing to you, right? And again, we are also giving you a lot of information associated with the exploitation itself. For example, if you look at the exploitation, we are also telling you how many of these exploits can be recategorized as high, medium, and low. And there is also a 1 to 4 kill chain information that we provide. People from the cybersecurity background will understand how important is 1 to 4 kill chain, right? So the important aspect for any exploit to be really be effective is to pass through this 1 to 4 kill chain, and we're telling you which are those vulnerabilities that are likely to pass through this 1 to 4 kill chain, so you can then focus on those 9%, for example, in this particular representation, and see what are the remediation or mitigation actions you can perform on top of that, right? And we also tell you what percentage of your devices or the applications are likely to have the total technical impact because of the risks that we have identified. Then we do point what percentage of the risks are impacting your essential or critical devices, right? So with all of this information, imagine how easy it would be for you to build a remediation plan using our solution. So we have productized all this physical and manual laborious work that today the CISO teams would do to actually take the vulnerability from the CVE information, then put it onto an Excel, then manually do the reprioritization, then give that plan to the IT team to do the patching, right? All of that task, we have automated it, we have productized it. You don't need to build these Excel sheets anymore. Please get out of Excel sheets, look at our solution, and use the risk prioritization module to have a very informed decision making process for your remediation activity. And
Yeah, Ravi, I think, could you go back to the decision tree really quickly? I think that's the one thing I wanted to just highlight a little bit more, right?
go ahead.
This isn't being arrived at randomly. You
Sure.
can see here the actual flow that's being taken to determine the likelihood of that vulnerability and how it gets increased and put up into that top left corner of the highest thing that you want to address. I think this to me is a nice visual representation of, hey, this is why you want to take care of this today. So that, and then of course the questionnaire, I think you briefly glossed over that. But one other thing I wanted to point out is you can patch it directly from here.
Yeah.
I know you didn't kind of touch on that, but as you go to that vulnerability down below there, you can go straight into patching it directly from the risk management module,
Yeah.
and just say, okay, let me just go take care of this right now,
Remediate.
which is fantastic. There it is, right? We don't want to remediate too many things, and we won't have anything to demonstrate. Another thing I wanted to call out, and I didn't see it in yours, probably because we have remediated a few of these, is you'll see kind of this this logo next to some of those CVEs and the risk management component when they're actively being exploited. When we know that they're actively being exploited, you'll see them down below, and you'll see that there's an active exploit going on that risk management component. But I don't think we had any in your environment, Ravi. Probably more likely in my lab environment than in the demo environment.
We are all secure, Marcus. Yeah. No active exploitation of our devices.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's another neat thing that kind of tells you what's going on and helps really elevate the risk associated to that particular issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah, I didn't see any down here. You would have seen it down there. But yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks, Ravi, for showing that. And then of course, patching it right from here is
The
just fantastic.
other aspect, Marcus, maybe if you could touch upon is the MITRE attack mapping. It's very, very important from a CISO perspective, right?
Yeah, this is neat that it's in here, and it provides quite a bit of information. The fact that it's all inclusive in one little area is really neat. And if you drill down into one of these, you can really see the detail associated to it, but then also the fix associated to it, which you kind of got here in this table. But if you needed to drill down into this, all of that data is there. You can see the actual exactly. Thank you. The score and metrics, the references of where they're coming from. And then, of course, the fixes associated to them. So for systems that you may want to address manually, you can still come in here and grab that fix information, or just, address it as a one-off. And we haven't touched on it because really it's the exception, not the rule. But
Right.
you can also go in and accept a risk. And the fantastic thing about accepting a risk in here is that it goes into a table that you can see all of the risks that have accepted, and you can do it for X amount of time. So you can say for 90 days, I will accept this risk, or for 180 days, or whatever it is. It could be 30 days. But the ability to know what risk has been accepted, it will also exclude that from all of the scans and reports and numbers and percentages that are going on out there. So that's really neat that you have that exclusion capability, but the ability to track those exclusions so that they don't just go into Neverland. You know where they are. You can export that, and those are the systems that you may want to have other mitigating controls associated to for that. So I think between the MITRE attack mapping and the fact that you have the exclusion capability, those two things kind of give you all the holistic view of everything that's going to be in your environment, from an attack perspective, but also from your remediation perspective and your exclusionary perspective. So you're not having to maintain it, again, as Ravi pointed out, in a spreadsheet. Excel is wonderful for a lot of things, but I think as a technological community, we've chosen to use Excel for pretty much everything, and it really isn't good for a lot of the things we use it for.
Yeah. Whichever tool allows you to keep doing programming, we all like that more rather than straightforward solutions. Right?
You can do a lot of programming in Excel.
Right.
Yeah.
Fine. So, only other thing, I mean, Marcus, because of the time, I would probably want to touch upon a little bit, maybe on the reports, Jaxir, maybe just
real quick.
Look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, we mentioned we would touch on that. Yeah, thank you for taking over. Apologies, I wasn't able to get my my permissions here sorted out quick enough.
Yeah, Jaxir is wearing multiple hats today.
Yeah.
Yeah, risk assessment, risk prioritization. Yeah, it's fantastic reports.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about or trying to articulate earlier in the webinar, is that it's a easy, simple to read report, but it's not a simple report in that it has all of the data you need to support everything behind it. It just makes it a lot easier to read so that you can understand what is trying to be conveyed with the information here. And it gets very granular down to the system, the IP address, what group, if it's in a group. We didn't talk about that either, but there's grouping capabilities not only within SanerNow, but within Active Directory that can be brought over so that you can specify it down to how you want, and also at the site level if you have different sites that you're managing. So it's really, really neat in the report because you can get super granular about where things are in terms of your risk and your vulnerabilities. I think this is a fantastic report, right? Especially since, yeah, exactly, you can go in here and build your own, and it's not a crazy build. It's just a drag and drop build, and it's everything that we have, the data visualization that has been shown today, but much beyond that as well, because we're implementing the capability of our APIs. So there's some data that may not be visually represented within some of these different parts of the SanerNow platform that are definitely available in the reports, which is fantastic. Because you can get really, really cool reports out of this to provide to the different folks that are going to need them. Oh, don't go too crazy on me there, Ravi.
So the other aspect to kind of talk about, Marcus, is that I've worked on multiple business intelligence solutions, right, which are very powerful. I'm not talking about them in negative terms, but they're also complex. It's not a very user friendly solutions. You would need an administrator to kind of build new reports, build new dashboards. They'll probably give you the denormalized tables, and you would find it hard to understand what table provides what kind of attributes. So there is a lot of training that you need to undergo to use some of those reporting solutions. But with our reporting solution, I think it's so simple and easy, and we have normalized all the nomenclature. You just go select a table, drag and drop, and build your own set of reports.
And isn't it interesting how when you get to things like the top 10 non-compliant devices, that it's always somebody in cybersecurity that's on that list?
Yeah. Superb.
Excellent. Well, thanks for covering those reports. I think that's huge. And again, the reports provide a lot more data than what's available in the visualizations, just because it's getting at all of the raw data, not just the visualized data from the different components within SanerNow. So those reports can also be emailed out. If I recall, you can also set a regularity, right? You can set email out on a schedule. Yep.
Yeah. You can schedule those reports. You can download it as PDFs.
Yeah. And then send it out.
Yeah. So
Just that one feature would have saved me quite a bit of time.
Sure. Fantastic. I just hope that audience on the webinar today and people who would watch it in YouTube got a sense of what is the capability of the solution. I understand we spent most of our time talking about the capability. We could probably do one more webinar if required, do a detailed deep dive on the solution itself. But the intent of, I think, today's session was more to kind of educate the users of why you need a risk remediation solution, right? Jaxir and Marcus, if you guys would like to kind of add any closing comments, probably we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it was beautifully laid down, and thanks to both of you, right, going through the solution. And as Marcus said, it can look simple on from a high level, but it has gotten all the details that you would want, right, to the minutest level that you want. So this is what this is the contrast that we built for enterprise IT security teams, where all of the challenges on the left hand side, and we've talked about most of them, right? Lack of single agent to drive functions, false positives, false negatives, different tools, high cost of ownership, right? Not fully automated, multiple point solutions, not fully, I mean, not just dependent on patching, not doing anything else, right? So that's a half bacon solution that most IT security teams enterprises are living with. But again, that's not anymore. As Marcus said, had he access to this tool, he would have gone on a lot more holidays, right? I want to make sure that we also bring in among all of the benefits of this solution. One critical benefit that I see and is a lot impactful in this whole process, right, is of building a neat and streamlined solution is the total cost of ownership. Right? If the cost is high, it's not going to be sustainable, right? In case there's a budget cut, you know what happens to technologies, right? In those cases, so it's really critical to build a solution that does not break your bank, and so it's sustainable, right, from the start. And that's one of the critical points that must be considered, right, when building this solution. And finally, I think, summing it up, those are the two critical impacts that IT security teams, as Marcus and Ravi talked about, are gaining out of this solution. The risk-based remediation solution out of SanerNow platform is saving time and increasing speed, right? So as you want to reduce more vulnerabilities at speed, it need not be at a scalable cost, right? The
Right.
cost has to go down over time. And how do you build such a solution? I think you can definitely reach out to folks at SecPod to do that for you. The second thing that's really important is speed of remediation, right? If you're not remediation, if you're not remediating fast enough, guess what? It's the same scenario we're going to end up in, the which we called out at the start of the session, which is million vulnerability problem. And I'm pretty sure nobody wants that million vulnerability problem, right? It doesn't, although it has kind of a sound to it, but it doesn't. It isn't a good problem to have, right? I think we're almost. I may want to take maybe one question from the audience,
One
and
quick
we'll
thing,
wrap it
Jax,
up with that.
just one quick thing I wanted to
Yeah,
add,
yeah.
Jax, here. Um,
Yes, please, Marcus.
glossed, we glossed over it really, really fast, but I think that second to last slide, one more back, when we're talking about all of the challenges, it's cross-platform, right? We briefly touched on it. It's Microsoft, it's Mac, it is Linux, all flavors of Linux. I think
Right.
that's huge, right? We glossed over it super quickly, but the fact that we're able to address all three platforms, and in many cases, not just Red Hat or Fedora based, but also the other one. So it could be Ubuntu, it could be SUSE, it could be Red Hat, it could be whatever flavor, Mint Linux. It doesn't matter. The reality of it is that you're able to administer it all from a single platform. I just think that that's a point we might have missed here on the challenges for the vendor tools, because a lot of those are segmented out by the platform.
Oh yeah, that's I think that's very critical, right? In an enterprise, especially in an enterprise infra, there could be a lot of operating systems, flavors of those operating systems, types of devices. So it's not just remediation of a few devices, but what we're talking about, remediation at scale and variety of remediations that we can perform across the enterprise infrastructure. Right. Thanks for highlighting that, Marcus. Great. I think one question, and we'll wrap it with that, and maybe Marcus and Ravi, both of you can take this one. Is it really realistic? Is it realistic for enterprise IT teams to envision a near zero vulnerability? Right? Is there a real? You talked about it, but is the dream real? Is it a dream, or is it a realistic expectation?
I think, like all things that are future vision, right? It's realistic if you project it out into the future. I don't think it's realistic to say by the end of the day today or tomorrow or the end of the week I'm going to be at near zero. But I think if I have the right process, the right tools, the right drive, and the right support to get there, it's absolutely realistic. And not only do I say that from what I know from SecPod and what I've done in the past, but from the customers of SecPod that have actually achieved it and have gotten to that point. So it's not a pipe dream, but it is not something that should have an expectation of being completed in a small near term. If you have, like you said, close to 1 million vulnerabilities or even 300,000, as you start to go on the journey of getting there, right? It comes down in larger chunks. So you start incrementally, and the next thing you know, you're cutting them in half, and yeah, you're going to achieve that goal, provided you stick to it.
Yeah. Greatly put, Marcus. The other aspect, I think, if you do want to achieve that like Marcus said, you really have to plan it well and follow the path that will take you to the near zero, right? So, but we will provide the necessary tools, right? SanerNow as a platform will provide you, enable you to reach that particular goal, because one of the things we do fantastically well is to provide you continuous scanning capability with our solution, which will help you first identify those vulnerabilities very early in case, right? So basis that you can then go ahead and do your remediation planning using our powerful risk remediation module.
Fantastic. Thanks both. That was really an interesting talk, and I got to learn, a lot from this session, right? And what my takeaway is for any IT security engineer or a part of the team is if you got to have more holidays, right? You got to plan it the SanerNow way and move out of Excel sheets. Although it's a understatement, but give it a shot. Try the platform yourself, and I'm pretty sure you'll find value. So thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Marcus, for all your valuable time. I'll wrap it up really fast now. So, as a closing statement, of what SanerNow is a continuous vulnerability and exposure management platform. IT security teams use it to discover and prioritize vulnerabilities, implement patches, comply with regulatory standards, get asset exposure, implement security controls, and a lot more. You can get a free trial today. Just go to www.secpod.com and you can try it yourself. Hey, once again, we'll have a recorded version available on our website, YouTube, and Bright Talk channels. We'll also send you an email with the exact URLs to the video, as well as the slide deck that Marcus and Ravi used. Please keep tuned to SecPod webcast. We'll see you on the next session. Thanks for your valuable time. We wish you a happy time ahead. Thanks. Thanks all. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, Ravi.
Thanks, Jaxir. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, folks, for joining. Have a good day.